One, two, three.
My name is Joe Austin and welcome to Scealta. Can I remind everyone who's joined us that Scealta is a joint Fáilte Fears to Hear Féile and Phobal production. We're a year old. We began in March of last year, and as our first programme was going out, my guest this evening was lying down in a hospital. So my guest is Niall Murphy, and welcome to Scealta. And I have to say, it's not an exaggeration that you were 13th of March, I think you had been admitted to hospital. We went out that week and the conversation was from your friends and associates. The conversation was, would you do? And I have to say the consensus wasn't good.
Yeah, you're quite right on the dates. Friday the 13th of March, I had my first symptoms. And really just to take that week in its context, the way it unfolded, I had been invited to speak in Glasgow at Coatbridge as part of their St. Patrick's Week festival, and really to talk about Ireland's future. And I'm sure we're gonna touch upon that throughout the chat. And first of all, thank you very much, Joe, for inviting me on. I've thoroughly enjoyed watching Scéalta. You're a talented man, and it's very humbling to be invited on. So thank you. So I was in Glasgow on, I think it was a Saturday the 8th of March, and even that became a planes, trains, and automobiles. I decided to go to a Celtic match and bring my dad. He's a big Celtic fan. And Aidan Donaldson, good friend of ours, teacher of mine at St. Mary's, my old school. And we had decided to treat ourselves and fly over, but Fly B collapsed the night before. So there were no flights, so I had to get one of the Dawn buses, one of the Dawn Celtic buses. And then when we got on the other side in Scotland, the bus broke down. So it was a cursed trip from the start. But left Glasgow early on the Monday morning and flew to New York, where I was doing a similar presentation, the same PowerPoint, and just skewed it a wee bit for an American audience, and did that on the Monday evening. And then on the Tuesday evening, there was the Brehon Law Society had their annual St. Patrick's dinner, and John Finucane was actually meant to be out as the guest speaker. I was only there in attendance as a guest, and John's flight was, I think he took the decision himself to cancel. So I was left. I wasn't left on my own, but I was then asked by the Brehon Law Society would I fill John's shoes, which I was happy to do. But at that event, I think that's where I picked it up. I have no symptoms in America, and then when I got home, my youngest daughter, youngest child, I had her first confession on the Thursday, so flew home early hours Thursday morning. Didn't come to work on Thursday day. Went out for a family meal after the confession Thursday evening, was fine. Friday went into work. We represent the next of kin of John Pat Cunningham, who was murdered by the British Army in Benburb in 1974. And the soldiers being prosecuted at the minute in the Crown Court, Dennis Hutchings. And I was in attendance at a review in the Crown Court of Dennis Hutchings' prosecution with the family. And we spoke for maybe 10 minutes afterwards, and the reason I mention this is will become apparent. So stayed in work till about 7, had a bit of paperwork coming away all week, and went home. And at 8 o'clock, I got a Chinese on the way home for me and the wife. And at 8 o'clock on Friday the 13th, just as I walked through the door, I just felt, oh, this isn't good, I don't feel good. I went straight to bed. And then when I woke up on Saturday morning the 14th, I was just completely floored. Could not move. Tiredness like you could never even describe. I'd never experienced a like it in my life. Temperature was out of control, over 40. I have a friend who's a GP, and I texted him and he says, listen, you might have that virus. It was relatively early days at that time, and
yeah,
I didn't know anybody who had had it before. But as the as the next couple of weeks unfolded, transpired that the table that I was at the Brassneck Law dinner, 4 out of 6 were hospitalised, including me. So the doctors, when I came round, told me that I had been exposed to a heavy saturation. So I expect that it was just circulating at that event. But yeah, couldn't leave my bed from the Friday the 13th until I was admitted to hospital on Wednesday the 25th of March. And it was about 10 days in before I got a heavy cough. Other than that, it was just flu symptoms, tiredness, and temperature. But when the cough came, there was one bout of coughing. I thought, this is it. Is this how it ends? Because I couldn't breathe, couldn't get breath in. I felt I was drowning. I felt that. I felt every sinew in my body just clutching for air, for oxygen. I could feel a twinge in my hamstring, and I was a bit of a panic attack too because you can't breathe. So I was able to get my breathing going again by my own accord. And I says to Mary, my wife, just take me to hospital here because this isn't good. And then when I got to hospital, they had like a triage porta cabin at Aontroma Hospital, and there was a nurse there who said, I'll get a doctor, but I just need to do just some vital statistics, temperature, and oxygen levels. So they put like a wee finger glove on your forefinger, and that can give an immediate readout on your blood oxygen, and that was low, below 80. You or I or any person who's of good health should be above 96. And the nurse says, I could see her startled look, and she just said, "Don't need a doctor. Get into that wheelchair. I'm admitting you." Was admitted, and within an hour, had seen a consultant who had done a few more tests, and he very, very assured, comforting, confident, but told me that they needed to put me in an induced coma to treat me. And, that was it. I didn't question him. He was a guy that went to university and was experienced and knew what he was doing, and I just placed my whole trust in him. But I went into the coma that day, 25th of March, and didn't come out until the weaning off the drugs. So first sort of consciousness was in around 7th, 9th of April. Very, very confused. Didn't really have an understanding of what I had gone through or what everyone else had gone through. But as I came around, my wife later told me that she had got a call on the 30th of March to say that they were unsure if I would see it through the night, and to begin to steel herself for the worst news, which, I was completely unconscious, so I had no idea what was going on. But it was much more difficult on her and my wider family. And then just when I did come around, the support messages, it was just extraordinary. It was humbling, just everyone's goodwill rallying towards me, and it was almost at times, I don't know, cosmic, because when you're in a coma, you do have hallucinations. The doctor did tell me you're going to have some strange thoughts, and sometimes I felt that it was slipping away, and maybe you were pulled back, and it might have been just the goodwill and the prayers that were said. It was an extraordinary experience altogether.
I have to say, and this because people are not a bit shy, I've actually seen you walking up Castle Street being accosted and asked for advice and asked for a legal consultation. But it isn't an exaggeration to say that during those 16 days, if people weren't actually writing your obituary, they were planning your obituary. And that's how serious. And I'm sure people haven't spared you any of that and they've told you. And if that's what they were doing, when I was getting ready for this conversation and started, and I've known you a long time, but I started kind of, you know, because we have an hour and an hour isn't very long. So I started kind of reviewing, how do you describe this man? You know, senior partner in the Kevin Winters law firm, GAA activist, founder member of Gaelscoil and Glengormley, father of three. You know, it just goes on and goes on. So if I was having difficulty doing that, I don't know what they were going to say about you in your obituary. You mentioned your father earlier on, and you mentioned briefly the rest of the family. And I know that, and I've known your father for quite a while. I know that you're very heavily influenced then and now by your parents. So if we can, just so that people can get a sense of not what you do, but of who you are, take us through that. Your father and mother were school teachers?
Yeah. So my father, Liam, is the youngest boy of a family of 12 from Blackwatertown in County Armagh. And his sort of life experience is indicative or representative of so many people of that generation. Of the 12 siblings, there was 6 boys and 6 girls. The oldest boy and girl stayed in Ireland, him being the youngest boy, and his closest sibling, Melody Pearl, she was the youngest girl. They stayed in Ireland, benefiting from the 1947 Education Act. But he had 2 brothers and 2 sisters that went to live in England, and 2 brothers and 2 sisters that ended up in America, in Bangor, Maine, and in Chicago. So I have as many cousins in England as I do America, as I do in Ireland. And just how that family, close knit as it would have been, was broken up by the economic situation that faced, you know, Catholics of that era, is very lamentable, very sad, but it's an experience that every family will have in their familial history.
Sorry, school on the Glen Road, Christian Brothers?
Yeah. So mother and father both moved to Belfast, as you say, became school teachers, settled in Glengormley. Both worked in the same primary school, and I'm one of 5 of 3 younger brothers and an older sister. Older sister runs. She's the only person in the world that scares me. And I went to St Mary's. So started out in Barrack Street, where people from North Belfast and Lower Falls would have went for 3 years, and then in 4th year up to Glen Road to do your GCSEs.
The nickname, I don't know whether you're aware of, is the nickname of the school that you went to, Barrack Street, was called the Ragged School, and at the latter half of the 1800s. And it was because the Christian Brothers, obviously educationalists, but the Christian Brothers, their boast was they could take the poor and turn them out the other side of that education system as geniuses or successful business people, men in their own right. You would have thought, or I would have thought, given the fact of that influence by your mother, and I know you're equally influenced by your mother.
Yeah.
Your mother's quieter than your father. Your father has an opinion like me on about everything, but unlike me, he's mostly right. I'm mostly wrong. But your mother, in her own quiet way, is an influence on the whole of the family.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Was there ever a temptation to go into teaching as opposed to go into law?
Yeah, you know, I didn't grow up wanting to be a lawyer. You know, my initial inclination probably would have been towards teaching. And my father fairly quickly disabused me of the notion. It's a fantastic profession, but it's a difficult job. You know, I don't think teachers get enough respect. Certainly in the current pandemic, teachers are frontline workers really, and have gone above and beyond. So you know, from a lifestyle or a life perspective, I think teachers should have a better standing and better that I respect. I think they're the butt of a lot of abuse at the minute. But no, my father basically says, you know, there's more to life than teaching. Don't be conditioned by, you know, growing up in a house with two teachers and look around you. I had an idea that I maybe wanted to do. I always loved the Irish language at school. You know, St Mary's inculcated a very, you know, strong graph for Irish language, sport, culture, which all would have been in the house anyway, but it was certainly deepened at school. Annual trips to the Gaeltacht, Loughinisland and Ormeau Road. So I had my idea maybe to do Irish and media studies at Coleraine. And then when the results came in, I also had applied for law for no other reason than, you know, what dad says that a law degree, you can do anything with it. You don't necessarily need to be a lawyer. It's a good passport degree. So I got the marks and decided I would just give it a crack, and it's worked out well.
And again, I know that, and it's just life is so fortuitous. I know that getting into a law firm wasn't a breeze in the park. I think you made 40 applications.
Yeah.
That's no reflection on you. It's just a kind of difficulty of getting into law. But 40 applications before you ended up with Peter Madden's office, Madden and Finucane, that is, and obviously you learned a lot there, and it was an experience.
Yeah.
Were you and I've asked many people this, and when you were in Peter Madden's office, had you a sense of the history of that office, you know, Pat Finucane and some of the breakthrough cases that were taken against the British judiciary in the 70s in particular and in the 80s? Was that something that had an influence on you?
Absolutely. You know, everything that, you know, I've gone on to do in law was as a result of what I experienced and was inspired by. In Madden and Finucane, you're quite right. I did apply to 30, 40 firms, and Madden and Finucane was the only firm to offer me an interview. And when I went down for the interview, I'll never forget the office manager, Des Dick. He's still there. He's another good man. And he said, maybe mischievously, when can you start? And I said, well, my last exams say the 1st of June. I can start on the 2nd of June. Not really wanting to start the day after your last exam. But he goes, right, I'll see you on the 2nd of June then. And genuinely, I turned up the day after my last exam and loved every minute of Madden and Finucane. You know, people talk about the influence of Pat Finucane in the law, and you know, there is a generation of lawyers who are inspired by him and by the Finucane family's campaign for justice. But in technical terms, what that really would have meant is Pat Finucane pioneered the practice of judicial review. It was a little known means by which legal mechanism to challenge decisions of the state, and Pat pioneered the application of judicial review to all public bodies in the 1980s, most notably Belfast City Council, and challenging the sectarian practices that had become norm. So that immediate understanding of the power of judicial review and its application, and to be vigilant as to what, you know, somebody might walk in with instructions and it's just, I've experienced this is wrong. And then you have to apply your analytical experience to say, well, what we need to do is challenge the decision that led to what you're experiencing by way of judicial review. And that was a bespoke almost practice that had developed in Madden and Finucane. Plus it had a very strong criminal department. Kevin Winters was in charge of the criminal department. That's where I worked as well. So I got an exceptional grounding in criminal law, which has, you know, between that and public law, stood me in good stead in practice.
I always thought it was ironic, and it certainly wasn't the design of those who murdered Pat Finucane, that what they were trying to quash and trying to suppress was that courageous, that accountability, that bravery that solicitors at those days had shown. What they were trying to crush through his murder went on to create a whole barrage a chorus of solicitors your age and around that thinking. So it was completely self-defeating. I mean, that wasn't their intention, but it was completely self-defeating. Parallel life to all of this. I want to talk about Mora just for a wee second, but I also should have brought you back. You talked about the Gaelic Gaelgory house that you grew up in. It was also a very sporty house. You went on, you won a junior hurling medal, which we need to mention. You know,
absolutely. I owe your money first now.
No. People have actually threatened me and said, you know, he'll never talk to you again. So tell me about that.
Well, you know, my club is St. Enda's. I've played there all my life. All my formative memories were growing up at the old club. My dad was the chairman there from 1979 to 1981, and throughout the 80s, our facilities were atrocious. Our pitch would have been, you know, very as a field. You know, it wasn't a pitch at all, but it was ours, and we loved it. And you know, mightn't have been the best team at all times, but we always fielded. And one of the formative experiences was just understanding, you know, the hatred that some people had for the Gaelic identity, and our house would have been peppered with phone calls in the middle of the night throughout the 80s about the house, about the club having been burnt down, or there was a bomb at the club. I think the clubhouse was burnt down 13 times in the 80s and early 90s, and then in the 90s it escalated just to a campaign of murder. Our president was shot dead in October 1993, Sean Fox, at the bottom of the Hightown Road, just on the same road as the club. And then on the 5th of December 97, our senior football manager, Jerry Devlin, was shot dead. I'd have been 19 or 20 at that time, and would have been breaking on the senior football team that Jerry was the manager of. And that had a big, deep effect on me. And in 2002, 2001, another two murders. There was a lad, Gavin Brett, just a local fella, lived in the Hollybrook estate, was standing at the bottom of the club lane, was shot dead in July 2001 in a drive-by shooting, completely random, disgusting, atrocious murder. And in July 2002, a young fella who I would have, you know, mentored throughout the club, Jared Lawler, was shot dead in Glengormley. He's the last Catholic to have been shot dead by loyalist paramilitaries. So all of those life experiences at formative times, you know, were informative as to your own identity, what it means to be a Gael. I keep and will always say the GAA is more than just a sport. It is about the rich service that we provide for our community. Our doors are open to everybody at all times, and we are about fostering community spirit and allowing people to embrace and enjoy the deep fabric of their identity as well. And really that has inspired me, motivated me throughout my adult years in terms of giving back. I benefited so much from having, you know, teams to play for, and I've probably spent the last 20 years as part of a strong committee. It wasn't just me by any stretch. Good people in our club, and we've enhanced our facilities at St. Enda's, unrecognisable from the cricket field that I grew up on, with 3 grass pitches, with a new hall just recently opened before the pandemic, £2 million, with an indoor 4G, and an outdoor hurling wall with floodlights. And we've enhanced our offering to our community such to the extent that we've doubled in size in the last 10 years. We've over 1,000 members now. And similar to what you said there about Pat Finucane, the intention was to kill the ideal that he represented, and whereas what we injured, many other clubs did as well. But if their intention was to murder us out of existence, that failed as well. we're as strong as and vibrant a unit of the GA as exists in Ireland.
I remember speaking to your father one time. I have family members live in Glengormley, and I was asking your father about the survival of the club, let alone the growth of the club. And he said, you know, in his own way, and he said, you know, going to open the club gates was a matter of life or death. You didn't know when you were going to get ambushed, and you didn't know when you were going to get home, if ever. But the people around the club and the people who supported the club never missed a beat. They done all that had to be done, and they done it with a good heart, and they kept doing it. So you're right. It wasn't simply I mean, every club, I suppose, has to labour for funds, for members, for kits getting clean, for performance on the field and all that. But when you add all of that together, and then you say, you know, for being part of this club, I could lose my life. And you point out members did. And Gaelscoil Enda, of course, has grown from strength. I think there's 217 children at the moment in it. And I know there's a waiting list, which I'm told is the length of the Antrim Road, actually.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, I want to just kind of leapfrog do back and forward in all of this, and I want to return to all of it if we have time. You mentioned your wife and your 3 children. So always as the youth use that old adage, behind every great man there's an even better woman. So where did you meet?
Yeah. Yeah, it's actually a lovely story. I was at the stag weekend of one of the fellas in the Ireland club, Michael Curran, one of the Currans, and all clubs are built of great families, and the Currans are a great family in our club. All the 9 boys, I think, and 8 boys and 1 girl, all of whom played, and Philip still does, and Marty. Marty was goalkeeper in our Ulster final last year, saved 5 penalties in the penalty shootout. But the oldest, Curran Michael, was getting married, and he had his stag do in Ballyshannon, and there was a night out in Bundoran. Mary, the wife's from Billig, so people from Billig would go out in Bundoran. And I didn't bump into her or her friends on the Saturday night, but she bumped into some of the lads out of the club. So the next day we were down on Rossnell Beach. Great day. It was a bank holiday weekend. And we're just literally hitting the hurling ball a bit. And these 4 or 5 girls came strolling up the beach from the night before. And whereas I hadn't met them, some of the other lads had. And I obviously straight into the middle of it, talking away. And that's how I met her on Rossnell Beach. So the rest is history, as I say.
Thank God for Donegal. I tried to do a summary. I want to take you back to it, and I'm going to come back to speak about your children briefly. I know you're very private about them, but I want to speak about just briefly about it. But I mentioned, and I tried to squeeze into some of the descriptions, because I believe that people are bigger than their titles, you know, all that goes on. But, you know, senior partner in the law firm, dealing with some of the most controversial cases in these islands, fighting the battle every day. You've now taken on Basque cases of Basque separatists who have been denied justice just as we are. You're on the board of Brassneck, a drama group in the west of the city. You're a patron of Relatives for Justice, as well as being a legal advisor to them. Do you never take a break?
Yeah, no, well, listen, everything, the way I view life is if somebody thinks that, you know, for example, Relatives for Justice, to be asked to be a director of Relatives for Justice was an honour. And there's some requests that are made of you that you can't say no. It's just, when it was Niall Murphy asked me, and when Andre asked would I like to sit on the board of directors of RFJ, you don't think twice. And it is one of my continuing honours that I can, you know, put that on my CV. RFJ is an exceptional organisation which provides such crucial support to some of the most vulnerable people in our community. With regards to Brassneck Theatre Company, again, Tony Devlin just goes back to school. You know, Tony was here below me in Barrack Street. I'm sure you know Tony. Tony's great crack.
That school is a lot to answer for.
It does. It does. But you know, one of the things I like to do in St. Enda's is, you know, it's about fostering community development, and I like to put on plays in the club, and the best plays are by Tony. So every year, whatever Tony has on as his Feile play, or in the Roddies, I'll always ask him, Tony, would you come up and do that at St. Enda's for a night? And they're great nights for us. And people come together that might not otherwise get to go to the club, but all of a sudden you have 150 people in the room enjoying exceptional work by Tony. And that has led to, you know, other you know, people coming towards us. So in a year we might have 4 or 5 plays or comedy nights, and it's a great benefit to our club. So when Tony asked me would I sit with him on his board, again, how could I say no? And what he does and what Brassneck do, especially Brassneck Youth, is just exceptional contribution to community, which you know, I'm happy to support.
You've never made any secret of your, and it's never been a secret or an impediment to either your professional life or your personal relationships, but you've never made any secret of your Irish identity, your national identity. And I suppose you were naturally going to gravitate towards Ireland's future, or towards something similar to that. You know, I listened a while ago to a unionist spokesperson who described this desire to have a conversation as to where we all go as potentially the most dangerous threat to the union. Now, I don't agree with that, and I suggest you don't agree with that. So tell me, how did Ireland's future, which is another big undertaking, I have to say, how did it come about?
Well, it's probably my most solemn undertaking, because it is dealing with such a serious entity, you know, the reunification of Ireland. Is only but one of many civic organisations and obviously political parties that are motivated by the issue. But really, it came about. Ireland's future only really formally incorporated as an entity in February last year, just actually before I got sick, before I went to America. But had been a looser collection of like-minded people for some years previous, and really we came together organically. And really it was in mid 2017, and it was at the height of, you know, Curragh yogurt and crocodile jobs and ongoing campaigns for equality for, you know, people who wanted marriage equality, that was accessible in every other jurisdiction on these islands, but not in this micro jurisdiction. The repeal the 8th debate was ongoing in the south. The law, as a lawyer as well, you know, you have a slightly dispassionate analytical understanding of the complexity of that debate, but the law in England and Wales wasn't as applicable, or was applicable here. So there was a fast emerging rights vacuum, which was deepening in this jurisdiction, and all other jurisdictions on these islands were moving at pace towards sort of social and liberal reform, both in the south and in Britain. And it was that justice vacuum that people were talking about everywhere you went. You know, if I was sitting in court before the judge came out, you know, the topic would come around to one or other of these rights vacuums at the side of a football pitch, dropping the kids off at school, out for a beer with your mates. You know, VCML the football, it was on the lips of people. And there were other people contacting me. So obviously I'm on the board of RFJ, and there was access to justice was a serious issue. Article 2, which is a international obligation on the British state, wasn't being honoured. And you had all of these things in the mix. So I would maybe be talking in the justice circles about that issue. Obviously, working with Gaelscoil Éanna, I was delighted to assist in mobilising for La Jarrig, which 15,000 people under Andron Jarrig came out to protest for their rights. Delighted to bring my family along, everybody dressed in red. And I had a good appreciation of that. So between all of those fields and coming into contact with people like Chris Donnelly, the teacher in Andersonstown, Brian Feine writing in the Irish News, hitting a lot of the same points that we sort of decided to come together for a meeting. And it was arising out of that meeting that we sent correspondence to the Taoiseach advising, appealing to him, it was Leo Varadkar at the time, that there's a backwater development here and we're Irish citizens. And whereas we don't get to vote for you, you are the leader of a sovereign state. And whereas Britain, as its wont, was looking away, we need you to look forward. And it was a basic letter asking him to make sure that that vacuum was addressed on whatever could be done. And it was a bit of public activism. We asked, we set about, between the 10 or 15 of us that were around the table, hosted by Jerry Carlisle in his offices in the Kennedy Centre, actually. We said, right, let's try and get 200 significant people in the arts community. I looked after the legal community, in the sporting sector, and the 200 people signed up immediately. And the biggest complaint from that letter was people saying, why did you not ask me to sign it? So we knew that we had touched a nerve in the wider psyche, and returned to the theme, as Brexit was the cascading disaster which it now is, which we all knew it was going to be, car crash in slow motion. And we sent another letter to the Taoiseach a year later, signed by 1,000 citizens, because we knew that, you know, we had so many complaints, why did you not ask me? We were able to get 1,000 citizens, and through Jerry Carlisle's work, exceptional signatories in the business community, 326 titans of business, the employers of thousands of people. So that was a much more representative and deeper appeal to the Taoiseach. Hey, listen, you cannot ignore the concerns of Northern nationalism in the way that Irish governments have in the past. And there was a very public quote, which we quote back to him, that he said, no Irish government will ever leave behind Northern nationalists again. And, you know, that was a very welcome remark. But within the mobilisation of those letters, we wanted to give a public expression to what we knew was a deep reservoir of concern in our community. And in January 2019, we held a Beyond Brexit event at the Waterfront Exhibition Centre, the biggest public space in the north. And we didn't know how it was going to go until, you know, it's 10 o'clock and the lights are on. But to this day, what I looked out and seen, 2,000 people, standing room only, every seat taken. And that event was probably the first time that all the leaders of pro-United Ireland, anti-Brexit politicians were in one room, on one platform at the same time. We had Mary Lou McDonald address the audience, Colin Eastwood addressed the audience, a Minister of State from Fine Gael, Joe McHugh, the Minister for Education in the South, came and made an address, as did the then Deputy Leader of Fianna Fáil, Dara Killeary. So very significant event, very significant day, but arising from that day, huge success, just, you know, was spectacular in its execution. And that was because of the group of people that were involved in the planning, preparation and execution of it. And afterwards we had a post-event review, and we knew, listen, we need to now formalize ourselves. This is a thing. There is an appetite for what we're talking about, what we're trying to address. And that's where Ireland's Future came from. And it's an all-island organisation with as many significant people in Dublin as we do in Belfast and Newry. And Frances Black, Senator Frances Black, spoke at the waterfront, and she herself was just, breath was taken away at the scale of what we had put together. And we asked Frances, would she become chair of the organisation? I serve as secretary, and Frances was delighted to be asked and has really embraced the role. And now, you know, our activism was somewhat curtailed, as has everybody's been, by the pandemic. So we've really moved with the times and innovated, not dissimilar to yourself, with this format, exceptionally successful as it is. We now deliver webcasts, and we've done 9, and we know we have a good reputation by the quality and caliber of guests that we've been able to attract. So we've had David Williams speaking on a panel with on the topic of economic, how would an economic United Ireland look. We were able to get Professor Gabriel Scally to talk about the health implications of a United Ireland. Tony Connolly from RTE spoke to us about Brexit itself. Congressman Richie Neal, the chair of the Ways and Means Committee, which is the committee that decides whether Britain get a post-Brexit trade deal or not. You know, it's almost up to Richie, and he's a passionate friend of Ireland. He has done a webcast with us. Colin Harvey, you know, you can't talk about Ireland's future without referencing the exceptional, academically robust work that Colin does, and really informs a lot of our approach and our thinking. But perhaps the most successful webcast that we've done was one just there last Thursday week ago, where we had Andrea Catherwood from ITV News hosting 5 people culturally that would have been from a traditional Protestant or Unionist upbringing. Glenn Bradley, a former British soldier but very liberal, forward-thinking commentator, attended, as did Mark Langhammer, a leading trade unionist from Rathcoole. Reverend Karen Sethuraman, a Baptist leader in East Belfast. Denzel McDaniel, a former editor of the Impartial Reporter in Fermanagh, all spoke, and we were quite deliberate. The floor is yours. The title of the event is yours. We're proposing no questions. We just want you to discuss in a safe space, and we want to listen. Because your voice, it's your home. You live here too. We want to hear from a different perspective. That webcast has had 35,000 views and has really transformed, perhaps, the debate in that regard.
And that debate, I should add, you know, sometimes we complain about these very important events which are deemed unimportant by sections of the media. But that debate has went into the States and is circulating in the States and is influencing, and you mentioned American senators, their influence in terms of the Brexit deal, bad deal as it is. Brexit is a bad idea. In my opinion, it's a bad idea. Those things wouldn't have happened without that lobbying for intervention, lobbying to protect the Good Friday Agreement, the informative information that was supplied to them, and the implications of it. So even, you know, it has a light bigger than here, bigger than us. And even with the pandemic, it's still going there. I want to move you forward just a wee bit, because I keep doing this on you, and it's very unfair, and it's to try and cover as much of it. One of the things that we do, and you'll probably get this tonight, is we ask people about our victims. Sorry, I meant to say our guests. So I, for instance, asked Jim Clinton the other day about you, and I've asked different people about you. And people told me, in terms of sport, in terms of GAA, and this is their terms, not mine, that you were as hard as nails, that you were just solid. You know, to look at me, I'm not a GAA player, maybe a GAA supporter, but I'm not a player. And I suspect that that's the case. I don't think you would have survived COVID. I don't think you would have got back on your feet as quick and all of that. So I think all of that's true. And I've watched you coming out of courts and standing with relatives, and I've watched you when you've been successful. I've watched you when they've been successful, and I've watched you when they've been frustrated, and I've watched you when they've been wrecked. And it's clear to see the hurt in their faces, but there's also a hurt in your faces, your face. The Ormeau Road incident where you came out of Musgrave, I haven't seen you as angry as that in quite a way. And I mentioned your family, and I mentioned the 3 children and all of that. So let me deal with just the human side of your personality. How do you deal with that? What drives you? Is it because professionalism kicks in and takes over? Is it because you're right and they're right, and that's motivation? And how hard is it to watch the disappointment and the frustrations, which are created? They're not incidental. They're created by a system, in my opinion, that's governed and organised against relatives looking for truth. How hard on the individual, on you as their representative, is that?
Well, my view, just professionally as a solicitor, is that any time any person bestows upon you the most sensitive and oftentimes devastatingly tragic event in their lives, it's an honor to be asked to assist and advise that person. And some of the instructions you've referenced there, the Ormeau Road, you could equally say, you know, the Loughinisland families that I've worked with since January 2005, or the family of John Pat Cunningham, who have campaigned in the face of a mainstream media campaign in Britain. Any of those families, our practice is privileged to represent dozens of families. But it is, whilst it's an honour, it's a very solemn responsibility that you carry, that you must discharge, and as best you can in the face of, you know, ridiculous adversity. The architecture of our justice system looks good on paper, but in practice it's very difficult for families. The police ombudsman looks good on paper. It does discharge the state's responsibility in terms of Article 2 of the European Convention on Human Rights, but the state won't fund it to the level that it needs to address all the complaints. So there's a backlog of 400 cases there because there's not enough investigators in the police ombudsman's office. So that's a state issue. Similarly with inquests, there are only 90 or so inquests extant. The courts should be resourced. There should be judges and support staff and investigators and the technical support required to service those inquests such that they all be dealt with in the next 2 to 3 years. If this was in England, that's what would happen, but not here. And we have, you know, I've 2 families waiting for Stalker Sampson inquests from 1982, December 1982. I started that case with the mothers and fathers of both Seamus Gray and Roddy Carroll, and they've all died since. In the Ormeau Road, in the last 12 months, Jack Duffin's wife has passed away, as has Mark Hazard on the 11th of January this year. So people are dying without access to justice, and that's a stain on society, and that offends me personally and professionally. So that when setbacks happen at court, you invest as much as you possibly could, but never reaching the investment that the families do, because it's their lives, it's their loved ones. When setbacks occur, it is devastating. And however difficult that is to accept for me as a solicitor is inconsequential to that endured by the family, who I know go home and cry themselves to sleep.
Yeah.
So it's that solemn responsibility that you take on that drives you to invest so much. John Pat Cunningham is buried in the grave beside my grandparents. My father knew him growing up. If he had been alive today, he might not have been in mainstream education. Was terrified of the British Army and was running away when they shot him in the back. And that had a catastrophic impact on that small community, as I have experienced in mine growing up. I know what Loughinisland did to the South Down, wider South Down community, and the film. I know you have Barry McCaffrey on, one of my heroes in life. But that film was packed out in Downpatrick Cinema, Monday afternoons, Tuesday afternoons, morning, noon and night for weeks, because there was a thirst for knowledge and accountability in the wider community down there. So these things matter. These things aren't going away. Relatives for Justice will tell you that they support as many grandchildren as they do children. And these are grandchildren who have been imbued with their parents' campaign for truth, not always justice, but certainly the truth. And it's not going away. The McGurk's case, for example, is driven by all families, but the forensic research undertaken by Kieran McCart, who lost grandparents that he never met.
Yeah.
So if the British government, I sometimes repeat Mark Thompson's observation in this, that the British government are the three phases, all beginning with D. In the first phase, they deny liability. Then they will delay accountability. And in the third phase, they wait for the person to die. But that third phase isn't working, because children and grandchildren are now taking on the pursuit of their families' ambitions.
I want to ask you just about it. We've been speaking for 55 minutes. You may be surprised.
Passed in a blink.
And we started, yeah, of course. We started when I was trying to get a sense of your own background. You started with the advice your father gave you. Don't rush into teaching. It's a hard out station. On a Saturday night or a Friday night, after you've had a small Chinese and you've a glass of red wine, do you ever go, I'm going to kill my dad? I could be marking homeworks as opposed to and you made the point very, very well. This is David and Goliath. This is a small cadre of people trying to fight a judicial system that has unlimited resources and unlimited conspiracy. So do you ever regret? Do you ever look back and go, this is a two-part question. Do you ever go back and say, I wish I had done something else?
No, I love every single second of what I do in every aspect of my life. Constantly inspired to get up and come into work and deal with whatever issue is pressing for that day. I absolutely love it. And I love it even more now, having had the experience of, missing death by
near death.
Horse. So I cherish it even more. And, coming out of the coma into all those messages of goodwill was almost like dropping into your own wake. And a lot of it was from clients that you had assisted and advised over years. And some of the messages that will remain private, of course, but they'll keep me going through until I'm finished.
You know this already, but I want to just say it for the record, and I'm going to ask you one last question. All of the people who sent you goodwill messages were not necessarily people of the same line of thought, because I had people who were contacting me saying, how do you tell them we're thinking about them, and how do you let them know? So through all of the political differences and all the kind of difficulties that we all experience, I think your illness, it allowed people from a very variety of backgrounds to wish you well, and that's a testimony to you. You said about the acceptance of Peter Madden and Pat Finucane's office, but of that been accepted as a trainee, as someone who's just come in, who's someone who maybe makes the tea for a year and a half, or whatever a trainee solicitor does. And thank God that they let you in, because we've all benefited from that. But when you look out and through your resume, you have pages and pages and pages and pages and pages of speeches that you made, and conference that you addressed, and things that you have done. Do you see, when you look out into the legal profession, into that world, which historically had been the property of the middle class, but do you see young Niall Murphys coming up?
Absolutely.
Kevin Winters about? Do you see all of that?
Yeah, I do. It's one of the gifts that we, the partners in our own office, enjoy the most, and it's being able to provide a pathway to the profession for those that might not otherwise have had that opportunity. And in our own firm in KRW Law, we really cherish the opportunity to provide those pathways. Kevin was, the way it works is you have a master and apprentice, so Kevin Winters was my master. Couldn't have hoped for a better person to show you the ropes. But you said there about making tea. In Madden nor here, nobody makes tea. If I want a cup of tea, I make it myself.
Good.
If somebody's coming in the door on day one, they could be handed a file of significance, and just, it's not sink or swim. We'll be there to catch them, but they're expected to, apply what they've learned in university and to gain experience, to go to court. Some of the best experiences that you'll get in court is getting shouted at, being held to account by a judge, knocking the rough edges off you, and that's the only way you learn. You learn by doing, and there has been a long pathway in our practice of people, going out and setting their own businesses up. Paddy Murray did his apprenticeship in with us. John Finucane did his apprenticeship with us. There's a firm called O'Neill's Solicitors. Shane and Niall worked here. So it's an ever-evolving tapestry, is the legal profession. And when you look around and you see other people that learned the hard tools of their trade with us, doing such exceptional work as those firms are doing, then you've affected the landscape, because you have set so many birds fly.
This is going to be one of these very rare occasions, and thank God we're recording it, where I'm going to have the last word in conversations.
Fuckle sure.
I know, go for it. I really want to thank you for taking time out today, and I know you've had a very busy schedule, so thank you. I think our conversation has given people an insight into the work, not only the person that appears on television, but the work behind that. I wish you well. I have to say, and I said this off camera, so I'll say it on camera, you're looking very good and you're looking well. So for being a guest of Scealta, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
I have no doubt we'll return to this conversation.
Thank you. Much appreciated.
Very much.